Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us and that you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
Today's scripture is from the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. May the Lord bless the reading and the hearing of his word.
For those of you who may be just joining us this Sunday in July, our theme this July has been our summer of service, and we've been looking at great servants of the Bible so far. Our first week we looked at Aaron and Hur, the supporters who held up Moses' arms. And then last week we talked about the example of John the Baptist, who he said was the promoter. And a promoter is someone who uses his or her platform in order to promote the glory of others. And today we turn to a different particular type of servant in our midst, the caregiver. And when I say caregiver, I'm speaking about, professionals in our midst who serve in caring professions, whether it is, in the medical industry or chaplains or therapists, so, the caregivers who do this day in and day out as part of their living. I also am speaking to Stephen ministers who've taken a pledge to be caregivers within our congregation. But really, in my mind, the people I thought most about were family members, people who live that journey of caring day in and day out. Spouses who are caring for another spouse, siblings who care for a sibling, children who are caring for their parents, or sometimes parents who are caring for a child with special needs. I've seen, there's so many people in our church that I could hold up as examples and models of caregiving. I've seen it throughout my ministry, been touched by the faithfulness and example of so many caregivers, but my first introduction to it was watching my own mom and my aunt care for my grandmother who had Alzheimer's, and I watched over 15 years their care and their love. That was my first introduction to how difficult and how hard the journey of caregiving can be. So today, as we talk about caregiving, we're going to use the example of Ruth and Naomi. And their story is a little bit different from all those other examples I just gave, but we're going to tell it in 4 movements. And I hope as I go through these 4 movements, you'll see kind of how the journey of caregiving corresponds to Ruth and Naomi's journey as well. So the journey of caregiving begins with a moment of crisis. Something goes wrong. Life throws you an unexpected curve. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't care that takes place in the absence, in good times, where there's no tragedy or hardship present. There's all kinds of care that takes place. A mom that organizes her kids' calendars and drives them to and from, that's caregiving. A dad who plays, wrestles on the ground with the kids or throws the ball in the backyard. Grandparents, I know there's many grandparents in our church who take care of grandkids, spoil them rotten while the parents are at work or going away for vacation. All of that is care. But the care I'm talking about today is the care that comes that when an unexpected tragedy or outcome takes place, when there is an accident or when there is an unexpected diagnosis, when there's that first kind of loss of coordination, loss of balance, loss of memory that is first just the first sign of what is to come. In those moments, in that crucible of tragedy, that is when our care is put to the test. And so it was for Ruth and Naomi. They cared for each other. They formed a family, there in the land of Moab. But when crisis struck, that care was put to the test. And the crisis came in a series of waves. The first wave to hit was the loss of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. And then I should speak even before then, the first tragedy was the famine that forced Elimelech and Naomi to move to a foreign land and for their sons to take foreign wives. But then they had to suffer the loss of Elimelech, and just when they're finally beginning to recover from that, then in short time, both Mahlon and Chilion, their children, died. And not only do you have the waves of grief that would have hit them again and again and again, but this situation left Naomi and Orpah and Ruth in very tenable, vulnerable situation because women in that culture and time could not own land, which meant that they were completely vulnerable. The only thing that Naomi can do is she gets word that the famine has finally lifted back in her home country. And so the only thing she can do is to think, I can go back to where I was once from. And she hasn't been there in over a decade, but I can cast myself on the care and kindness and mercy of kinsmen and kinswomen that I used to know. But she can't even imagine dragging along her daughters-in-law, for them to have that same fate. And so Naomi makes the best loving decision she can, which is to release Ruth and Orpah from their commitment to her. She says, turn back, my daughters. Go back to your tribe. Go back to your home. And perhaps you can find husbands there. Perhaps you'll have children. Perhaps you'll have a family and a life. Maybe God will be more kind to you than he has been to me. Go back to your home, she says. Now, with that tragedy, then comes a choice. And Orpah and Ruth illustrate this choice perfectly. Now, Orpah is not cold-hearted. When Naomi makes this claim, her first impulse is to stay. And then when Naomi insists, she clings to Naomi. She weeps and she cries. But at the end of the day, Orpah goes back to her people. Ruth makes a different and difficult choice. And her choice is simple. She chooses to stay. And that, to me, is the heart of caregiving. It is a choice to stay with a loved one no matter what the future may bring. The word choice, to some degree, to me, is even a little too soft. Because really what it is not just a choice, it's a covenant. That's what Ruth does with Naomi. She says covenant words, covenant language. She says, from now on, where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. And your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. She's making covenant. In fact, what she's probably doing is she's repeating words that she would have said when she married Naomi's son, her husband. She would have said then, where you lodge, I will lodge. Where you go, I will go. And now she's taking that same covenant and now she's extending it, renewing it, and saying, I'm not giving up on this promise I have made. Even though I have lost my husband, my promise to you, Naomi, remains the same. This is the covenant that is at the heart of caregiving. It's a promise to stay. A promise to uphold the vows that we made. That's why when we, perform weddings, what do we say? For better, for worse, and richer and poorer, and sickness and in health, because it's a promise that holds us to our choice. The promise kind of limits our choices. And so we might say, well, if we didn't have this promise, there's these other choices that on the surface of it might give me more happiness in the short term. But when we honor the promise, we find a life that is richer than anything else we could imagine. The Hebrew language has this word that it often gets translated in our Bible as steadfast love. It's my favorite Hebrew word there is. It's called chesed. Say that with me, chesed. And chesed, we translate as steadfast love, but what it really means is covenant loyalty. It means staying true to the promise that you have made. And when they describe God's love, this is the word they use, chesed. God has made a covenant, a promise to us, and God will keep that covenant now and forever. And they say the mountains may depart and the hills may be removed, but God's chesed, God's steadfast love, his covenant loyalty will never wear out. He is true always to his promises. And my point is this, is that when you make the choice as a caregiver to honor your covenant, to stick to your promise, to stay, you are participating in, echoing the everlasting, steadfast love of God. And that's profound. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the decisions get easy. The truth is you have the covenant, but within the covenant, as you keep the covenant, you'll face a lot of choices along the way. The covenant of love sometimes requires us to make difficult choices. And I know in particular, there's one choice that kind of looms large for many caregivers. It's when they reach the end of their ability to provide care for their loved one. And they have to make a difficult choice, the choice that both caregiver and care receiver are loath to make, that their greatest fears. What if the time comes when my loved one needs to be placed in an institution of care, a place where they'll be surrounded and receive the care and support that they need? And a lot of people, I just want to be real blunt about this. A lot of people who make that choice, they feel an immeasurable sense of guilt. They feel like they have broken their covenant of love. And that guilt is even compounded frequently by the confusion and anger of the loved one who is placed in an institution, right? But I want to be really clear about this. That if you ever have to make that difficult choice, you are not breaking your covenant of care and love. Sometimes that's what keeping the covenant looks like. Sometimes it looks like making a difficult decision on behalf of the person you love. And you can continue, even in that context, to continue to live out your covenant by visiting all the time, by advocating for their needs with the staff, by supporting and encouraging the staff who now help you, assist you in providing care and love for your loved one. We continue to keep the covenant. That's the heart, even when we have to make decisions that are hard and difficult. My point is this, as I say, Ruth made a choice, but really what she made was a commitment. And then that commitment led to choice after choice after choice, a whole series of choices that strung together make a journey. So this is stage 3 in the story. First, there's a crisis. Then there's a covenant or commitment. And then comes a journey. And this journey is going to take Ruth to a land that she's never been to meet people who are suddenly her family, but she's never ever met them before. She has to navigate all of their customs and their language, and she has to perform tasks that she has never performed in her life. That's the journey of caregiving, isn't it? For those of you who have lived through it, if you live through the journey of caregiving, you will go to places that you never thought you would go. And you will meet people that you never thought you would meet. You will make family with people with whom you had no other commonality before. I've seen caregivers make family just sitting in the waiting room at a hospital or a doctor's office. You will learn new language. You will acquire new specialized knowledge about the care of your loved one. You will become an expert in their care. And the funny thing is you will be stunned sometimes how so many other people and how you yourself once went through life blissfully unaware of all that knowledge that you now acquired. And you'll perform tasks that you never would have imagined that you would perform. Tasks that perhaps, might have stripped you or your loved one of dignity where we're not covered with that covenant of care and love. You'll say prayers that you never thought you would pray, or sometimes you'll reach the point where you don't know how to pray anymore, and you have to lean wholly, entirely on the prayers of others. Your faith will change, the way you see God and the way you see others. You will not be the same person on the other side of this journey as you began. It is a long journey of caregiving, and this is why I describe it as a journey, not just a singular choice. Because when you make the choice to stay, that's what you sign up for, is a journey of walking beside someone else. And the hardest part about it is that you can't fix it. You can't take their pain away. You can't make it all better. Isn't that what we talk about in Stephen Ministry? You can't fix it. And so many of us want to be fixers, but you can't. There are healthcare professionals, people who can intervene with specific treatments and care to lighten the load, but your commitment as a caregiver is simply to walk beside every step of the way. One of my favorite books about Haiti is a book called Mountains Beyond Mountains. It's the story of a humanitarian doctor named Paul Farmer who has started an organization in Haiti called Zami La Santé, Partners in Health, that is one of the best healthcare organizations, not just in Haiti, but in anywhere in the developing world. And if you read the book, it kind of just details his journey and specifically how he was treating drug-resistant tuberculosis, not just in Haiti, but in Peru and Eastern Bloc countries, kind of around the world. And anyway, Paul Farmer, I should have said this, he was trained at Harvard. He could have worked anywhere in the world at the best medical facilities that were possible. Instead, he chose to work in under-resourced places. And often in those contexts to face incredible setbacks, to lose patient after patient that had he been in the States, had he had access to better healthcare, he could have saved. And so at one point he's kind of reflecting on that in the book, and he says, one of the things that I and my partners have had to do is we've had to make a commitment to fighting the long defeat, he calls it. He says, here in America, we get so focused on winning, right? Like when our team is winning, the local team is winning, it's our victory, it's our team. But as soon as we go through a long losing streak, we disassociate ourselves from that team. It's no longer our loss, they lost, they messed up, right? And he says, we as Americans, we always want to be on the winning team. But at the risk of turning our backs on the losers, no, it's not worth it. So we make the commitment to fight the long defeat, to walk beside those who are struggling, even if it means we lose. And I feel like sometimes caregiving is like that. It's a commitment to fighting the long defeat. It doesn't mean that there are victories, there are moments along the way we could celebrate, but it means that we suffer loss after loss after loss after loss, but we make the commitment to walk that journey all the way through. And at the end of that journey comes a reward. So first there's a crisis, a tragedy, a commitment that we make, and then a journey. And then at the end, at least in Ruth and Naomi's story, comes a reward. And the reward for Ruth and Naomi, it kind of feels like a Disney movie in a way, right? Because Naomi and Ruth, they come across a man who is gentle and kind and noble and good. And I don't know, the Bible doesn't say this, but in all the Bible story picture books I looked at, Boaz was also handsome and strong, right? Like that's the way he looked. And Boaz takes an interest in Ruth. And he intervenes in her life. He happens to be a kinsman, and so he takes on the role of kinsman redeemer. And what he does is first, he pays off all of their debt, Naomi's debt, Elimelech's debt. He buys back the land that Elimelech would have sold before they made the journey to Moab. He takes Ruth as his wife, and he promises to give her children. And those children will not bear his name, but will bear the name of her husband that is now gone, so that Elimelech's land will continue, and they will inherit the land that he just bought back on their behalf. And the child which they have turns out to be the grandfather of the king we know as David. Isn't that powerful? I find it so profound that when the authors of Scripture tell the story of King David, the greatest king in Israel's history, it begins with a commitment of two women, one Israelite, one foreign-born, who chose to stay committed to one another during a time of tragedy and loss. Now, as I said, the journey of caregiving doesn't always turn out that way. But that doesn't mean there's not a reward. It's just a different kind of reward. The reward is not that it gets fixed. Remember, we'd have to walk beside. The reward is not that, the elimination of the problem or the crisis or the tragedy. No, often the reward comes through it. The reward is whatever happens inside your soul on the journey of caregiving. As I said, you will be a different person on the other side. And maybe that different person that you are has humbler faith, more confidence in prayer, more confidence in God's presence. It might be that you have greater compassion or gentler wisdom to offer others who are going through that time. The reward might be an awareness of the systems of support, the love that surrounds you, and an ability to lean on and receive that care and support from others. And it might just be an understanding or an appreciation of what truly matters in life, loyalty and love. And I know that loyalty and love are their own rewards for this reason, because I've been with many people who have suffered the long defeat. And as we talk about their loved one, as we talk about the journey of caregiving, I have never heard anyone say, I wish I had those years back. I would have done so many other things with them. I've never heard anyone say that. Every person I talk to says, I am so thankful for that time I had with my loved one. Because even though it was hard, even though it was difficult, there was an exchange of love so pure and so tender in those moments that it is irreplaceable. There is no higher treasure I could offer you than the gifts of loyalty and love. They are their own reward. But that's not the only reward. Because we as Christians, we believe that there is a greater reward promised one day in heaven. That as we care for, tend, that our loved ones decline, we can look forward to a restoration that we will not get to see in this life, but we will see and the next. And knowing that someday we will be reunited with those we love, that is the great reward that God gives to each of us. And so if you are on this journey, just to recap, if you are from the tragedy or the covenant, or if you're in the midst of the journey and haven't yet seen the reward, I want you to take heart and be encouraged. For great is your reward in heaven. And in the hard days and the hard decisions, you are not alone. God is with you. And he is present in and honored by the love and care that you are giving to a loved one today. And if you're on the flip side of that love and care, if you're in the position of receiving the care and love of others, take heart and be encouraged. For the love which you are receiving is a measure, a reflection of the love that you have given throughout your life. And even on the hard days and the hard decisions, you are not alone. God is with you. And if you are neither one of those places, be thankful. But I also charge you to be appreciative of the people around you. And I call on us as a church to be a community of care and support for the caregivers and the care receivers among us. Let us be a people of faith who reflect God's covenant of chesed love, steadfast, faithful love to the world around us. Amen. I know we're a little past the hour. I want to ask Kim to come up and join me for just a moment, because Kim is a therapist and works with a lot of people in this caregiving journey. And so I want to ask Kim a few questions. She brings to this a knowledge and research that I don't particularly have. First question I want to ask you, because I know in your profession you care for a lot of people who are caring for others. And I was focused so much on the giving of care that I didn't really talk about self-care. And so can you speak for just a quick moment about how people who are at a caregiving role can also care for themselves?
Yeah, I'll be quick, but I really want to acknowledge and thank you for making space for us to have this conversation because it's difficult and most of us avoid it until we absolutely have to have the conversation. So thank you for making space for us to talk about difficult things. We should be able to do that at church. So, when your loved one needs the kind of care that you've talked about today, and you've, like most of us, blissfully gone along in your life, without paying attention to how that happens. There's so many things that have to be done. And I know there's so many people out here that are doing all those things, but until you're overwhelmed and exhausted, you don't realize that you really haven't been taking care of yourself. Taking care of yourself is one of the most important and one of the most neglected things that happens among caregivers. We've all been on a plane, and the attendant that we're not paying attention to says, put on your own oxygen mask first, even before you help your child who's in the seat next to you. The reason for that is that if you don't take care of yourself first, you're not able to take care of others. And if you take care of yourself well, you will be taking care of your loved one well.
And you had some research around this that you wanted to share, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of research. And, one of the things that caregiving support organizations say is they, talk to a lot of folks, and like a person might say, my husband is the one who's sick, but I'm the one in the hospital. Because caregiving is hard. It's just hard in so many ways. So the CDC has acknowledged that caregiving is a public health issue. In Indiana, 24% of people age 45 and above have reported that in the last 30 days they've been caring for a friend or loved one. 15% of those people are mentally exhausted, more than 14 days of feeling mentally unhealthy. 18% of those folks are feeling physically exhausted, so it's a tiring job. 37% of them are not getting enough sleep. And caregivers age 66 to 96 have a higher risk of death than their non-caregiving peers. So caregiving is hard, and that's the reason you have to care for yourself as much as you're caring for the person that you're giving care to.
So if you're in that role, how do you care for yourself.
That sounded grim, but there's hope. So you got to do these things for yourself. You have to eat healthy. You have to get enough good sleep. You need to exercise. Keep your own medical appointments. Practice a hobby. Have some fun. You can't stop living because you're caring for your person. Connect with friends. Join a support group. And please, please, please don't be ashamed to hire helpers.
Yeah. And I know you have, well, let me flip it on the other side for just a moment. If you are in a position where you are receiving care, what word of encouragement or hope could we offer?
I always say this about us. Most of us, I think, are middle-class Midwesterners, and so we have this really strong work ethic that says I can do it myself. And so when you have to have help, even when we're not needing care, really, how many people find it really difficult to ask for help? See, y'all, how we are? So, you need to ask for help. You need to receive help. And I love what you said in the sermon. You said the care that you receive is consistent with the love that you've given to someone. So let them love you back. If you're needing care. And I will say, all I would add to that is don't believe everything you think. A thought is just a thought. So when you think that you're a burden or that God has abandoned you, it's just a thought. Really explore whether that's true or not. I would guess that it is not true.
Especially if you're thinking, I'm alone, no one cares. Yeah. That's not a reality. That's just a thought. And you have to realize there's a lot more care and love around you than you know. These are some resources that are available. We hope you'll write them down or pass them on to someone you might know. And any last words that you want to share with the church?
Yeah. So I don't know if Bob is here, but our own Bob Drawley, our director of senior adult ministries and congregational care, has had this topic on his mind for a long time, and I have chatted about it. And the August programming for the Sam's Luncheon is a continuation of this conversation with some folks from our congregation and me.
And August 10th is that date.
August 10th at 11:30. Yep. So if you want to continue this conversation with us, and I hope that you do, I invite you to the Sam's Luncheon in August.
Yeah. We're going to close with a prayer, and this is from a book called Every Moment Holy. This is the second volume, and this prayer is a liturgy for those who tend a loved one in decline. And I invite you just, close your eyes, settle into a place of prayer, and I invite you, as Kim and I are going to read these words back and forth, but perhaps you can think of a loved one who's going through a difficult time and a time of decline, or maybe you think of someone you know who's in a caregiver role. Hold them in your heart and your mind as you listen to these words. You know, O Lord, how much a heart can take, the limits of our strength. You know the toll this long-term caring for another extracts from body, mind, and soul.
For the grief we know is not the sudden sword fall of a single tragic moment. Rather, it is like the steep, spiraling staircase which we descend for endless days and nights. We lament each past happiness that will never come again, comparing what is now to what was then. We mourn also the lost possibilities, the dreams and joys and might-have-beens that will never be. And all the while, we grieve to see how each small mastery of life gives way to greater need.
To care so much, while knowing that our labors will not end with recovery and wellness, but with a final breath, a hand held, and then a warmth slipping away, that is a hard knowledge day to day to carry. For we are not nursing our loved one back to health, but stewarding their slow surrender of it.
Love is wearying in this way, and even we who deeply love the ones we serve need grace upon grace, lest we despair. So be our rest, O Christ, when there is no other rest to find. In the midst of long nights and lonely grief, be our comfort. Even as we carry this burden, let us know we are also carried by you. May your tender compassions and unfailing love become our strength. As our own reserves are exhausted, teach us what it means to lean upon your strong arms.
Renew our strength and rekindle our hope. May your holy promises shape and shepherd our imaginations, that we might come to view our acts of service from the truer vantage of eternity, in which all our long labors of sorrowing love are preparing for us an eternal weight of glory. These hours given to loved ones are not lost or rendered meaningless by death, but instead are as well invested as time could ever be, These acts are the tear-watered seeds that will bloom into resurrected joys.
Let us peer into this mystery even now, O Christ, with eyes of faith. Help us to see how every small service we render to our loved one echoes forward into eternity. Even as we lament the loss of our loved one, let us also rejoice at the knowledge of their coming redemption. This will not be a story that ends in the defeat it now seems.
So remember that, my soul. Yes, this time is hard, but take heart. It is only for a time. So let us serve our loved ones now, in light of the glory of who they will be when all these losses we lament are recompensed 10 million times over. Amen.
Good morning. My name is Bob Drolley, and I am the Director of Congregational Care here at Zionsville UMC. Thank you for joining us today. We would love to get to know you more and spend some time with you. If you'd like to know more about our faith community, please visit our church website at zumc.org. There you'll find the many ministry opportunities we have to offer. If you need to contact one of our staff members, all of our contact information is at the bottom of each web page. You can also connect with us via social media throughout your week for daily inspiration and community. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube under the username Zionsville UMC. Once again, thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope you have a wonderful week.